Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Nature of Teaching Professional Development webinar series. My name is Lauren Teamy, and I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Educator for Purdue Extension out of Delaware County. Today's webinar will cover the unit Mammal Food Webs. This unit will describe how living organisms are interconnected within the environment through food webs. Joining me today is Jared Brook. He's an Extension Wildlife Specialist for Purdue University, as well as one of the authors on this. Today, he'll be introducing the unit, following some of the videos of the individual lesson activities. I'll finish the webinar highlighting additional resources and the procedure to obtain your certificate of completion for the webinar. And with that, Jared, I'll turn things over to you.
Great. Thanks, Lauren, and thanks everybody for joining us. Again, we're going to be covering Unit 2, Mammal Food Webs, which consists of 4 lessons, all exploring food webs. So we're going to try to cover the complexity of food webs and how different wildlife species are interconnected through the food webs. And we're really going to try to distill down those complex interactions in food webs into a way that's understandable. And so you often hear the term food chain. We're going to talk about food webs, right? So very seldom is it actually a food chain. It's more of a web where you have several species interconnected in the environment through that food web. So this is Unit 2, Mammal Food Webs of the Nature of Teaching. And this is really built for K through 5 classrooms. It consists of 4 lessons that are either 30 minutes or 50 minutes long. All of them are less than an hour. The unit objectives are really to help students understand that organisms have different feeding habits, carnivores versus omnivores versus herbivores, and how you actually might identify those species based on their teeth. List and identify the different trophic levels within a food web. Help students recognize how organisms are interconnected within their environment, and then help explain how energy flows from one organism to another through the food web. This unit hits on K through 5 Indiana standards, and you can see the science standard that it covers there in the unit overview. You can also see the estimated time, vocabulary, objectives, required materials, and reference materials. So as reference materials, you'll want to familiarize yourself with the Common Indiana Mammals publication, which is free for download. And that's very helpful in helping you identify different mammal species by their skulls, by their tooth formula, as well as by the tracks, and then provides background information about their feeding habits. So what do they eat? You will also want to download Be a Tooth Sleuth poster, which is a free download from the Nature of Teaching website. And that's another good reference material to have to familiarize yourself with prior to using this unit in the classroom. The required materials in this are red and green yarn, scissors, skulls, skins, owl pellet kits, and an owl food web poster. We'll talk about where you might be able to acquire skin skulls and some of those materials later on. So here's just a picture of what the Be a Tooth Sleuth poster looks like. And so you can download this and print it off yourself from the Nature of Teaching website. And this is really good to really get students thinking about how different teeth are used to consume different materials, right? So an herbivore is going to have different teeth and different tooth pattern or formula than something like an omnivore or carnivore. So it goes through the types of teeth, so incisors and canines and premolars and molars, and helps students identify where those are located in the skull. And then it goes through the different feeding habits, so carnivores, herbivores, and omnivores. And then it gives you some examples of different Indiana mammals and what their skulls look like, and then gives you some sleuth clues on how to identify that species based on their skull and based on their tooth pattern. So it covers, species like deer, white-tailed deer that don't have any canines and lack upper incisors but have lower incisors. Tells you those are both absent, which is a good way to identify the skull. So a really good poster to have students look through and be able to identify different types of teeth and how that relates to feeding habits. inside that common Indiana Mammals publication, you'll find pages like this, which is from the Virginia possum, and it shows you pictures of the skull and of the teeth and tooth formula and arrangement, which can be helpful as you try to identify mammals by their skulls. So the key concept within this lesson plan is obviously food webs, right? So how are different wildlife or fish species, in this case, connected to each other through the food web, and also connected to plants and vegetation and so on. So this lesson plan will help to introduce the concepts of producers or primary producers, which are going to be the things that are producing a lot of the energy in the food web, which are going to be things like plants. That first level, which is going to be herbivores, and then goes on to include things like primary consumers, secondary consumers, tertiary, and then quaternary consumers as well. So it identifies these different terms and helps students understand how these different species are connected. That first lesson, Be a Tooth Sleuth, takes 30 minutes. The materials that are required are the Tooth Sleuth poster, skulls, notebook paper, pen, and pencils. And this lesson really helps students explore mammal food habits. So how do you identify a herbivore versus a carnivore or an omnivore by using the teeth? And so it really just focuses on exploring that poster and identifying different teeth and different tooth patterns and feeding habits. So here is a little bit of a sneak peek about that first lesson of being a tooth sleuth.
Hi, I'm Bob Corda, Special Projects Coordinator for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Our department is partnered with Purdue University with the Nature of Teaching program. I'm going to introduce to you Lesson 1 of Unit 2, Mammal Food Webs. Lesson 1 is The Mystery of Be a Tooth Sleuth. So the goal of this lesson plan is to introduce the students to the definitions of animals' feeding habits. So we can look at the dentition, what the different teeth are, and determine whether this animal is an omnivore, carnivore, or an herbivore. And we'll have the students go down that path of solving the mystery of what an animal eats. So a great way to introduce your students to the concepts and terminology in this unit is using the Tooth Sleuth poster, which is available on the Nature of Teaching website. So again, the objectives of this unit are to have the students determine which mammals are carnivores, herbivores, or omnivores. And so to help us determine what their feeding strategies are, we can look at their dentition or their tooth patterns, their combination of incisors, canines, and premolars, which are color-coded on this poster, to determine whether they are a carnivore, herbivore, or omnivore. So along the bottom of the poster we have examples of all three different types: carnivores, omnivores, and herbivores. So the poster gives us a good example between a true carnivore, the bobcat, and an omnivore, the raccoon. So you can see the large canine teeth. All the premolars have shearing surfaces on the bobcat and very small molars in the back, whereas a raccoon still has the canine teeth, and which are fairly large for its size, and the premolars and molars have this broad surface for grinding and shearing. So as another example, comparing the coyote and the beaver, a carnivore versus an herbivore, you can see very distinct incisors on the beaver. The canine teeth are absent, and the premolars and the molars are very flat for grinding, whereas the coyote has, again, these large canine teeth, and the upper premolars have sharp shearing surfaces, where the upper molars have flattened surfaces for grinding. So that's all there is to the mystery of being a tooth sleuth. For more information, go to purdue.edu/nature to download the lesson plan or for other units.
So pretty easy and straightforward lesson 1, being a tooth sleuth. So lesson 2, which is the poster exploration of food webs. This unit takes about 30 minutes. The materials you'll need are some sort of OWL or just general food web poster or handout. And this really helps students identify and understand the different trophic levels of a food web. So it's going to introduce the terms producer and consumer and various terms like that. And it's going to have the students just explore around a food web. And so in the lesson plan, this is the food web poster or OWL food web poster that's referenced in the lesson plan. And this can be purchased from the website Acorn Naturalist, but you can also find various other free food web posters from different sources just by doing a food web Google image search. So as long as you have some sort of food web poster, this lesson can be done. And here's Rod Williams, again, with a little bit of a sneak peek about the poster exploration.
Hi, I'm Rod Williams, Purdue Extension Specialist with the Nature of Teaching, here to provide a sneak peek on Lesson 2, which is poster exploration of food webs. And in this lesson, we're going to teach students how energy flows throughout different trophic levels of a food web. One way to introduce the terms producers and consumers is to have students list the ingredients that they had for dinner the previous day. Have them categorize those ingredients as producers, things like lettuce and tomatoes and pickles, or consumers, the meat products that they might be consuming. We'll then move over into our trophic poster, which you can purchase off of Acorn Naturalist. And in this poster, you can demonstrate to students how those energies move through those basic levels of our producers into our primary consumers, our secondary consumers, tertiary consumers, all the way up into our quaternary consumers, as you can see on this poster, which is designated by our barn owl. To learn how to incorporate this activity into your classroom, download the full lesson at www.purdue.edu/nature.
So that lesson and the first lesson really provide the background information that your students will need to complete the rest of the other 2 lessons in this unit. So this next lesson is the student investigations of a food web. And this is a way for students to perform an interactive activity that helps them better understand how interconnected and complex food webs are. So the things you'll need are red and green yarn, scissors, a raccoon skull, mink skull, muskrat skull, gray fox skin, skunk skin, some sort of plant, whether it's a potted plant you picked out from a garden maybe, or just a picture of a plant. And if you don't have access to those skulls and skins, then you can use pictures of those as well. And then you'll want to use the reference guide of the common Indiana mammals. And this activity has students play the parts of these different wildlife species in the food web to help them better understand how connected these various wildlife species are by the food web. So here's Bob, to help explain this lesson of student investigations of food webs.
Hello, I'm Bob Cordes, Special Projects Coordinator for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Our department has partnered with Purdue University with the Nature of Teaching program. We're going to be looking at a sneak peek for Lesson 3, Student Investigation of Food Webs, as part of the Mammal Food Webs unit. So in this lesson, students will continue their exploration of food webs. And this, in particular, for this one, they get to build their own food webs and connect the primary producers to consumers, to secondary consumers, and so forth. So your students may have it set up differently, but in this example, we have skulls laid out and vegetation with our yarn making up our food web. So the green is connecting our producers to our primary consumers, and the red yarn connects our secondary consumers to our primary consumers. So when your student runs through this lesson, they'll investigate and explore how connections are made, how connections are broken, and what consequences that has to the food web. So we all know food webs aren't that simple, but the lesson plan is pretty easy. Couple of resources, different colored yarns, and your students, and they're ready to explore the food web. For more information about this and other resources, go to purdue.edu/nature.
All right, just to show you how this may play out, we actually did these activities back when we could do in-person workshops prior to COVID. We ran educators through these nature of teaching workshops, and this is educators there actually going through this food web activity. And so you can see it gets pretty complicated pretty quick. Lots of yarn, both green and red, connecting the different wildlife species to each other and to the primary producers. So the fun activity, interactive activity, get students out of their chairs and up, and just helping them better visualize how complex a food web can get and what happens if you may remove a certain species from the food web. So this next and last lesson, which is lesson 4, energy flow and food webs, is always a class favorite. In this lesson, you'll actually be dissecting owl pellets and exploring owl pellets to identify what owls have been eating, looking for skulls and bones and fur and things. So it's a fun one to get students involved in. The materials that you'll need are an owl pellet kit, some sort of wooden probes, bone chart, skeleton chart, the owl food web poster, and then the Common Mammals of Indiana publication. And all of these resources can be purchased pretty easily and fairly cheaply from a variety of different websites. Carolina Supply is one of them, Acorn Naturalist, and others that sell environmental education equipment and resources. You can find these different materials that you'll need. So I'll have Rod walk you through how this energy flow and food webs lesson plan works.
Have you ever wondered, how can I get my students interested in concepts like food webs and how energy flows through those? Well, in this sneak peek, we might give you some ideas and an activity of just how to do that very thing. Hi, I'm Rod Williams, Purdue Extension Specialist with the Nature of Teaching, here to discuss Lesson 4, Energy Flow and Food Webs in the Mammal Food Webs unit. What better way to get students excited about energy flow and food webs than a hands-on activity? An activity that we're going to walk you through is an owl pellet dissection. And it's really great because you can buy these kits, and the kits actually come with their own worksheets, and you basically just have to go through the protocol listed in the worksheets, and the students have a fantastic 30 to 40-minute activity that really demonstrates how energy can flow from one organism into another organism through consumption. Let's check out some of the resources. The resources in these owl pellet study kits are pretty phenomenal. One of the first things you're going to notice is a teacher study guide, which provides all the background information that you're going to need for the students to conduct this activity. The second worksheet is the student activity worksheet, which provides a detailed protocol on what the students are going to need to do to dissect each of their owl pellets. And then while they're conducting the experiment, they have a data sheet to fill in data on their owl pellet dissections. But probably the most exciting part of the kits are the owl pellets themselves. You can see that these owl pellets are packed full of different skeletal remains from food items that the owls themselves have eaten, and provides a great example of how energy flows through a food web. And so the students really enjoy dissecting these owl pellets, reconstructing the skeletons, and then you can have activities where they go through and tell a story about how that energy's flowed through their particular food web. To learn more about how to incorporate energy flowing through food webs, I encourage you to download the full lesson plan at purdue.edu/nature.
So that's just a brief overview of all 4 lessons that are included in Unit 2, Mammal Food Webs. And so lots of a variety of different activities that all kind of build on one another to help students understand how a food web works and how energy flows through a food web. Some of those may be more equipment or materials intensive, but if you don't have access to skulls or skins or things like that, you can purchase them through websites like Acorn Naturalist, at least replications of those skulls and skins. Or you can use pictures of those skulls and skins that you can find through Google Images or other resources. So lots of ways to modify it based on what equipment you have available to you. So Lauren, back to you.
Great, thank you, Jared. I have one question though. So if someone didn't want to purchase it or like didn't have the means to purchase skulls or skins, where would you recommend someone reach out to, or who would you recommend someone reach out to just borrow them?
Yeah, so you can reach out maybe even to your local extension office. They may have some resources available that you can borrow, or may know of someone that has access to them. If you reach out to maybe your local state park or local DNR official, whether they work for Fish and Wildlife or state parks, they may know of someone who has access to that type of material. Or if you know of any outdoor educator in the area that does these kind of programs, they probably have access to a lot of these different resources.
Great, thanks, Jared. And just in case you guys didn't notice as well, this is something that can be done inside. So you can never predict the weather, but this is one of those that you can do inside. So
yeah, good mix of outdoor or indoor.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, again, thank you, Jared, for joining us today. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us for this Nature of Teaching Professional Development webinar covering the unit on mammal food webs. If you enjoyed this webinar, I encourage you to click on the card in the top right of your screen to visit our Nature of Teaching YouTube channel. Here you can view sneak peeks of lesson plans that are directly related to the webinar you just completed. To obtain your certificate of completion for the webinar, please click on the second card in the top right of your screen. Here you will be directed to a short Qualtrics survey to provide some feedback on the program. Once that's completed, you'll be automatically emailed your certificate of completion. And we really value your input on these surveys, as we need that in order to better our programming and also help tailor it more to the people that we serve, which is you guys. So we hope that you enjoyed learning with us and consider participating in additional professional development webinars offered by the Nature of Teaching team. Until then, thank you for engaging our youth with nature.